Good evening. Welcome to our Historical Society program. I'm Kathy Cavallari. I'm the president of the Westborough Historical Society. I'm having a little bit of technical problems with my laptop tonight, so excuse me if I freeze up. I sure hope that's not going to happen. I want to just welcome you to tonight's program. Who was Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller with Dr. Edith Jolin. This is in honor of Black History Month. And let me tell you a little bit about the society first. The Westborough Historical Society was founded in 1889 to preserve local history through research, programs, and the preservation of artifacts. Our headquarters is the Sibley House, an 1844 colonial, Greek revival home of the slave maker William Sibley, located in Westborough at 13 Parkman Street. And in the house, we house 3 centuries of artifacts from Westborough's history dating back to the town's founding in 1717. For more than a century, our mission has been to celebrate local history and bring that history to life through our monthly presentations like this one, tours of the Sibley House, which we hope to open up for tours in the spring, and special events. And if you enjoy tonight's program, which I'm sure you will, I encourage you to like our Facebook page, Westborough Historical Society, and check out our website, www.westboroughhistory.org. And you can also become a member through the website. And we'd love to have you join us and help support our work. A couple of housekeeping details. As I said, the program is being recorded for later rebroadcast on Westborough TV. I'll take questions, I believe, in the chat. I'll take questions in the chat, and I'll share them with Dr. Jolin at the end of the presentation. And just everyone is normally muted for the presentation. And let me tell you about tonight's presenter. Dr. Edith Jolin, MD, MPH, is a graduate of the Boston University Chobanian and Avedisian School of Medicine and the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. She completed residency training in psychiatry at the Ohio State University's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health in Columbus, Ohio. She served on the faculty at Ohio State, and in recent years, she's taught medical students at Boston University School of Medicine. Retired from clinical practice, she served as vice chair of the Massachusetts Medical Society's Committee on History and is currently on the board of trustees of the Boston Medical Library, where she continues her interest in the history of medicine. And now I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Edith Jolin.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And hello, everyone. I'd like to thank the Westborough Historical Society for the invitation to join all of you this evening. I did serve on the history committee of the Massachusetts Medical Society. And at that time, I was asked to do a brief essay on Dr. Fuller. And I did some background research. And tonight, I'd like to share some of the highlights from that research on the life of Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller, who was a trailblazing researcher, clinician, and teacher. So I see you're going to see my slides. Okay, great. So yes, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, well, first, I'd like to share an overview of some of his lifetime achievements. He was a pioneer in neuropathology and dementia research. He was one of the first Black physicians to hold a faculty position at an American medical school outside the medical school schools at Meharry and Howard. He was recognized as the first Black psychiatrist in the United States by the American Psychiatric Association. And he developed a leadership training program in neuropsychiatry for Black physicians. Okay, next slide. Okay. Okay, yes, here we are. So a few words on the early years. This is a quote from Dr. Fuller late in his life, around 1949. And he said, "There are many things which influence a man's life, and I guess that my grandfather was quite significant in mine." John Lewis Fuller, who was born 1794, his paternal grandfather, was an enslaved boot and shoemaker in Petersburg, Virginia, whose craftsmanship and business acumen enabled him to buy freedom for himself and his future wife, named Nancy. The family, in 1830, they moved to nearby Norfolk, a port city in Virginia with over 200 free Black households for better economic opportunity. And after the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831, restrictive laws were enacted and social and living conditions deteriorated. There was a risk of losing one's freedom papers. Next slide, please. Okay, here we go. So, a new life in Liberia. At that time, the American Colonization Society was created, and it established a Black colony in Africa for the resettlement of Black persons. Liberia was established in 1824. In 1849, John Fuller sent his oldest son, Tom, to Liberia for safety. And in 1852, he relocated with the rest of the family to Liberia. Despite harsh living and climate conditions, the family settled in and rose as community leaders. John's youngest son, Solomon, became a successful coffee planter with a large acreage farm, and he served as county sheriff and was later appointed to the Boundary Commission. And Solomon married Anna James, a teacher and the daughter of African-American medical missionaries who were serving in Liberia. And I found this map from 1856, so it's a little bit later, just to share with you where Liberia is. It's on the west coast, just north of Africa, just north of the equator. So you can imagine very hot tropical conditions. Next slide, please. So the future Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller was born on August 11th, 1872 in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. Solomon and his younger brother were homeschooled by their mother, and she also taught them Latin. At age 10, he attended a small private school run by Protestant ministry, and he became fascinated with stories he was hearing about the United States. At age 12, he attended a college prep school in Monrovia, and at age 16, he was admitted to a sub-freshman class at Liberia College. In 1889, after the sudden death of his father, he left Liberia to attend Livingston College in North Carolina to pursue his dream of becoming a doctor. In the US, he experienced lifelong discrimination and racism that he had not encountered in Liberia. Next slide, okay. Initially, he attended a medical school in Long Island, New York, but then he transferred to and graduated from Boston University School of Medicine in 1897. Back at that time, in 1895, about 385 Black physicians that year received an MD in the United States, and only 27 from white medical schools. As a medical student, Dr. Fuller had developed a strong interest in neurology and had hopes of pursuing those interests. But at that time, only 50% of all medical school graduates went on to any kind of internship training. And it was especially challenging for women and minorities to get such a position. Dr. Colby one of his professors of neurology arranged for him to have an introduction to Dr. George Adams, who at that time was the superintendent at Westborough State Hospital. Next slide. And here I have for you some information. It's actually the first annual report of the Westborough. At that time, it was called Insane Hospital. And it had opened up in 1885. And I included there for you a copy of the first annual report, as well as a drawing of the facility. As I understand it, it was on 200 acres. So next slide. So as fate would have it, in 1897, Westborough State Hospital opened up a pathology lab. And Dr. Adams was, the superintendent, was able to offer Dr. Fuller two options for an internship. He said he offered either 3 to 6 months without pay that might lead to administrative advancement, or an internship in the pathology lab with Dr. Mellis, and he would receive $20 a month, as well as room and board. Dr. Fuller accepted the internship, which held the promise of a research career in the new field of pathology. So he took option number 2. And the results of his lab work that year were published in the 14th annual report. And in 1898, he was appointed pathologist because Dr. Mellis left for a position at Johns Hopkins. In 1899, Dr. Fuller also received a faculty appointment at BU's medical school. Next step. So life was very busy for him at the pathology lab. He devoted many hours to developing the department, and laboratory work evolved as an important part of patient care and treatment. He also became editor of the Westborough State Hospital papers to promote the scientific work that was going on with the staff. They wanted to be better able to understand mental illness, and he began to publish his research. He took a brief leave in 1900 to study with Dr. Edward Dunham at New York City's Bellevue Hospital so he could further advance his skills in histopathology, which is the developing tissue slides that can be viewed under the microscope. And to be better able to create a very accurate record of his research along with images of his research, he developed what they call a photo micrographic apparatus. And this is not the apparatus he developed, but it's probably very similar to what he did put together in his laboratory. He basically attached a camera to a microscope. And a little bit later, I'll show you the kind of work he produced. So next slide. So this was a very important milestone for him. At that time, Germany was at the very center for research and science in the late 19th century. That's where all the new discoveries were happening. And Dr. Fuller was given 8 months leave by the hospital trustees to take advantage of this learning opportunity. And he taught himself German before he left, and he enrolled for 2 semesters at the University of Munich, where he took classes and went on medical rounds with Dr. Emil Kraepelin, who is who is the founder of modern psychiatry. And he was also, so this was a great opportunity for him. He was also one of 5 students admitted to Dr. Alzheimer's course on advanced laboratory and microscopic techniques. And Dr. Alzheimer, whose photograph is there, his research focus was on dementia. And in 1906, one of Dr. Alzheimer's 56-year-old patients passed away, and she had developed dementia early in her life, around age 50. And post-mortem examination revealed that some of the brain cells had abnormalities. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And Dr. Kraepelin, when he listened to Dr. Alzheimer's discovery, he thought he had come upon a new disease, and he called it presenile dementia. So, next slide, please. So Dr. Fuller spent his 8 months in Germany, and his time there inspired him to continue his dementia research when he returned home. And over the next several years, he published several papers in very high-ranking journals, including 2 separate reports of suspected cases of Alzheimer's disease that was diagnosed at Westborough Hospital. He was always, Dr. Fuller, he was very intense researcher. He always questioned research, and he was wondering whether Alzheimer's was this presenile dementia that Dr. Kraepelin thought was discovered. He was wondering whether it was a unique early onset disease or just a variant continuum of senile dementia, what they were aware of. And interestingly, current research supports what Dr. Fuller was thinking, that it was possibly just a continuity, a continuum of the senile dementia. At that time, there were major obstacles to funding and research grants from foundations for Black researchers. And some speculate just how much progress Dr. Fuller could have made had he been given more support for his, even more support, greater funding for his research. So as promised, this is some of the work he was doing in his laboratory. And this continues to be a very important medical journal, the American Journal of Insanity. It's now still around, still published. It's called the American Journal of Psychiatry. And in this study, he looked inside the brain cells, and he observed these thread-like structures in the brain cells called neurofibrils. And what he noticed about these, they're stained and you can see them as threads. He was noticing abnormalities in them, and there were tangles and whatnot. And on the left, you see a normal cell, and on the right, you can see that the cells are misshapen, they're swollen, or they look as though they're shrinking. So he didn't, he was wondering about that, just what kind of process was going on there. He suspected some kind of abnormal process. Next slide, please. And those are his drawings, incidentally. These pictures are taken with that apparatus I showed you, the photomicrograph. And you'll see these little dense areas. They're very dense, densely stained. And those are called plaques. And they represent protein deposits. So he was also seeing those in the brain cells. And he observed that they were associated with advanced age. They were seen more often in people with senile dementia. And in cases of senile dementia, he observed that the frontal parts of the brain, the front part of the brain, and the hippocampal region, which is deep inside the brain, seem to have more plaques than other parts of the brain. And of interest, that deep region of the brain called the hippocampus is where human memory is stored. So he was making these observations. And when I first saw these in the journal, it so impressed me that these images were taken over a century ago, long before we have the neuroimaging technology we have today with CT scans and PET scans and so MRI scans. So, excuse me, it's really quite remarkable that he was making these observations and sharing these images back then. Next slide, please. Just a few words. During this very busy time in his career, he did find his life partner, Nita Vo Warwick. They were introduced when she was visiting a friend in Boston, and they married in 1909. She was an exceptional person. She was very accomplished sculptress, and she was actually getting international recognition. She was from Philadelphia, and she graduated from the Philadelphia School of Industrial Arts, and she was awarded a graduate fellowship in Paris, France. And in Paris, she studied under such notables as Augustus Saint Gaudens and Auguste Rodin. In 1907, she received a commission for a large sculpture from the board of the Jamestown Tercentennial Exposition. And after marriage, she did accept commissions, but she mostly worked at her private studio. And she and Solomon lived in Framingham, where they raised 3 sons. Next slide, please. So a few words about some transitions. In 1909, he attended a symposium at Clark University in Worcester, Mass., where he heard Dr. Sigmund Freud speak, and he became very interested in Dr. Freud's teachings. And in 1919, when Westborough expanded its community services, Dr. Fuller began his own outpatient psychiatry practice. He remained part-time at Westborough as a consultant and transferred his research to BU's medical school, where he continued to teach until 1933. And during his last 5 years, he served as head of the neurology department without a title, but he did retire as professor emeritus, which is a high honor. He served as a consulting neurologist at several major Boston teaching hospitals, and after World War I, he developed a neuropsychiatry training program at the medical school for graduating Black medical students so they could provide medical care to Black veterans in the veterans healthcare system. Next slide, please. So Dr. Fuller continued with his psychotherapy practice until his later years. He received limited recognition during his lifetime. He did receive an honorary doctorate from his undergraduate college, Livingston College. He passed away in 1953. However, recognition did come to him. He received his much overdue recognition in the 1970s. At that time, the American Psychiatric Association called him one of the great men of American psychiatry. And the APA also gives out the Fuller Award on an annual basis. And it's given to a Black citizen who has improved the life of the quality of life for the Black community. In 1976, there was another honor. The Massachusetts State, legislature recognized his achievements, and they dedicated a mental health center in his memory. It's and you see it there in the photograph. Its name is the Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller Center, and it opened in 1976. And I think I have a final slide. Yes. And in 2017, the town of Westborough, Massachusetts, honored the achievements of Dr. Fuller by naming a scenic road after him that runs along Lake Chauncey. And there you see the street sign. And there was a ribbon cutting ceremony for the occasion attended by members of the Fuller family. In conclusion, Dr. Fuller was an extraordinary physician researcher and role model. His dedication to excellence in science and medicine will continue to be a source of inspiration for generations to come. And here I've shared with you my references that I used for this presentation. I found Mary Kaplan's book on Dr. Fuller, Where My Caravan Has Rested. I found her book extremely helpful. And I also found the essay, the article by Robert Sharpley on Dr. Fuller, very helpful as well. So, and then I just think that pretty much concludes. Oh, I just wanted to share as well that I mentioned Boston University School of Medicine. I did want to let you know that just recently they received a gift, and the formal name of the school is now the Boston University Aram Chovanian and Edward Avedisian School of Medicine. So I thank you very much for your attention this evening, and I guess that concludes my presentation.